Hey everyone, ready to step up from that tool belt and take charge of the whole construction site?
Yeah, it's time to trade that for a clipboard.
That's right. In today's deep dive, we're talking all about how to absolutely ace that construction scaffolding supervisor interview.
We're going to give you the blueprints to build a successful interview, basically.
Exactly. And we're drawing insights from RoleCatcher's interview and career guides to help you do it.
Think of this as like your own personal scaffolding, only it's helping you reach for those career heights, right?
I like that. So the interview guide is jam-packed with potential questions you might get. But before we jump into those, what's the one thing a candidate absolutely has to nail in these interviews? Like what's going to get their foot in the door for the next round?
So to impress in a construction scaffolding supervisor interview, you got to show them you really get what the job's all about, beyond the surface.
Right, because it's more than just, okay, I can tell which way is up on a scaffold, right?
Yeah, for sure. You got to show you understand the day-to-day of it.
It's almost like being a project manager up there in some ways, right?
Exactly. Think back to what the job description actually says. It's a mix of careful planning, like from those blueprints to making sure the budget works.
And you got to keep everyone safe while you're doing it.
Huge part of it. Got to make sure the work environment's safe, and then you're overseeing every single step of how that scaffold gets put up and used.
It's a lot of pressure. It's not just being comfortable with heights, that's for sure. It's managing people, it's managing the supplies, and sometimes it's even managing those nail-biting deadlines too.
Definitely.
Speaking of deadlines, the career guide actually paints a pretty optimistic picture for people in this role. Well, what's the job outlook looking like these days?
Well, with construction booming pretty much everywhere, the need for supervisors who know their stuff that's higher than it's ever been.
I bet.
Employers are practically tripping over themselves to find people who can get projects done right, safely, efficiently, on budget.
And not just get it done, but get it done by the deadline too, right?
Exactly. And here's the thing. This isn't just some job you clock in and out of. It's a whole career path with some serious room to move up.
Well, that's certainly what people want to hear when they're job hunting.
Yeah.
But before we get ahead of ourselves and start planning the victory party, we gotta conquer the interview first.
For sure.
And that's where I think RoleCatcher's AI comes in. Am I right?
You are so right. It's like having a secret weapon for your job hunt, almost.
Oh, tell me more about this.
So RoleCatcher, right, it gets there and analyzes job postings, but it's looking for those like hitting keywords that employers really care about, but they don't always say out loud.
Oh, so it's reading between the lines, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And then it helps you tweak your resume, fix up your interview answers so you're speaking their language, you're matching what they need.
So you walk in already knowing what they want to hear.
Exactly.
That's got to be a huge confidence booster when you're walking into one of these things.
I know, right?
All right, so with that in mind, let's dive into some of these questions. This first one seems pretty straightforward, like out of the gate. Describe your experience in scaffolding construction. I mean, seems simple enough, but what are they really trying to figure out with a question like that?
Okay, so that question, it might seem basic, but it's your chance to show them you're passionate about construction,
Right, because anyone can just rattle off a list of jobs they've done.
Exactly. Don't just give a boring list of projects. Paint a picture with your words. What different types of scaffolding have you actually worked with?
Like, get specific.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what were some of the challenges you faced? How'd you overcome them? Mention those tools and techniques. You're good at the stuff you already saw in the job description.
It's about proving you can actually do the work, not just that you've read about it in a book somewhere.
Right. Details. Details, that's your friend in these interviews.
Details are your friend.
Got it. So speaking of details, what about mentioning like new technology or advancements in the field? I feel like that's got to be something they're looking for, especially with how fast things are changing in construction.
Oh, absolutely. If you've got experience with any of those new technologies.
Which, by the way, the career guide touches on how technology is like rapidly changing the construction game.
Yeah, big time. So whether it's like drone inspections, 3D modeling software.
Oh, and those VR safety trainings are getting really, really popular too.
Yeah. VR's huge now. So showing you're adaptable, that you're willing to learn new tech, it's huge. It tells the interviewer, hey, I'm ready for the future of construction. I'm not stuck in the past.
Right. It's not just about building scaffolds. It's about building your skill set at the same time, right?
I got it.
Okay, let's move on to a question that I think can make or break a candidate. What steps do you take in ensuring the safety of workers during scaffolding construction? That's got to be a big one. Oh, yeah. That's where your leadership skills really get put under the microscope.
This is your moment, right?
It is. This is your chance to show them you're a champion for safety. Don't just give them some generic list of safety rules. Anybody can memorize those. You got to walk them through your process. Like, how do you size up a site for potential dangers before anyone even picks up a wrench?
That's a good point.
What specific safety gear do you make sure everyone's using? Not just like, oh yeah, hard hat, but the specifics. How do you talk about safety to your team so they get it?
So it's about being proactive, not just waiting for something to go wrong before you react, right?
Exactly.
What would that look like in action then? Give me an example.
Okay, imagine this. You show up at a new site and you see the grounds all uneven where they want to put a scaffold. A strong answer is going to be something like, before we even think about putting that scaffold together, I'm checking the whole site for anything that looks risky, like that uneven ground you mentioned. If I saw that, I'd be talking to the site manager right away, and we'd figure out a solution. Maybe we need to level the ground. Maybe we tweak the scaffold design a little. But whatever it takes, we got to make sure that thing's built on solid ground, right?
So you're taking charge. You're not waiting for someone else to tell you what to do. You're showing them you can solve problems.
That's what they want to see.
That's a great example. Now, I'm curious, the career guide mentioned a bunch of different safety certifications. How important are those for somebody who wants to be a supervisor?
Those certifications, they're like gold stars on your resume.
Do you need to have them?
They're not always mandatory. It depends on the company and the job.
Okay.
But they show you're serious about safety. Like the Scaffolding Supervisor certification or the OSHA 30.
Right. It shows you've gone the extra mile.
Exactly. It gives you an edge, especially if they've got a stack of resumes to go through.
So it's definitely worth looking into those, especially if you want to move up in the field.
Gotcha. All right, you ready for another question?
Hit me.
Okay, this one's about like thinking on your feet. Have you ever encountered a safety issue on a scaffolding construction site? If so, how did you handle it?
Oh, that's a classic one. They're trying to see how you make decisions under pressure.
It's a classic for a reason, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They want to know you can think clearly when things get hairy.
So how do you answer that one without sounding like you're making excuses or blaming someone else?
Okay, so for this one, think about a time you saw something that just wasn't right, a safety risk, and then walk them through how you fixed it. What did you do right then to make it safe? And then, just as importantly, what did you do to make sure it wouldn't happen again?
So you're showing you learn from it too, right?
Exactly.
Because we all make mistakes. It's really about what you do after the mistake, right?
Totally. Like, is it okay to admit to past mistakes as long as you show how you grew from them?
Absolutely. That actually makes you look good. It shows you're humble, that you're always trying to get better.
Oh, that's a good point.
For example, you could say something like, on a job a while back, I noticed one of the guys wasn't wearing their harness right. I stopped everything, talked to him one-on-one, made sure he understood how important those harnesses are. And after that, I made it a rule everybody, every day, gets a harness check before they start working. No exceptions.
Well, you took care of the problem in the moment, but you also made sure it wouldn't be a problem again.
Exactly.
You turned a negative into a positive, basically. Smart. You know, this reminds me, RoleCatcher's AI can be super helpful for coming up with these kinds of answers.
Oh, for sure.
Have you seen that?
Definitely. RoleCatcher, it's really good at helping you remember those specific skills or experiences from your past that fit these kinds of questions. Like it's jogging your memory for those, oh yeah, moments.
It's like having a personal interview coach, digging through your brain for all the good stuff.
Exactly.
I love it. All right, what's next on the question list?
Okay, so this next one is all about how you communicate and, how you get along with different kinds of people. What is your experience in dealing with stakeholders in scaffolding construction projects? And let me tell you, that stuff is crucial in this line of work.
Why is that? Why is that so important? Because if you're the supervisor, isn't it kind of your way or the highway?
You'd think so, right. But construction projects, they're like giant puzzles with a ton of moving pieces,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You're always talking to project managers, architects, the subcontractors, your own team, and they've all got their own things they're worried about.
And their own deadlines probably, too.
You got it. And their own ways of communicating. So being able to talk to everybody, make sure everyone's on the same page, that's how you keep the project moving on time and on budget.
And avoid those big misunderstandings that can cost a lot of money and time, too, right?
Exactly.
So how do you show them you're good at that in an interview? What does a good answer sound like?
Focus on how you communicate clearly. And with all those different people we just talked about, whether it's face-to-face or writing stuff down, for instance, you could say, I make communication a priority from the very beginning, like day one on the job. Everyone gets a copy of the project plans and the schedule, and we have regular site meetings to go over any concerns.
So it's about being open and transparent, making sure everyone feels like they're in the loop, right?
Exactly.
And speaking of making sure everyone's in the loop, let's talk about training. The interview guy has a whole question about this too. What is your experience in training scaffolding workers? What are they trying to dig into with that question, do you think?
With that question, they want to see if you can build a team, not just boss people around.
That's a good point.
It's not enough to just show them how to use a wrench. You got to make sure they get those safety rules, how to do things the right way, why teamwork matters.
Because you're only as strong as your weakest link, right?
Exactly.
What are some good examples of training methods you've used? Or like even that you've seen work well? I'm curious.
So the best approach is to adjust to the person you're training and what you're training them on. Personally, I've had a lot of success with hands-on demos, especially when it's like new equipment.
Show them, don't tell them.
Yeah. But I've also put together like these really detailed training manuals because sometimes you need things written down step by step, and that helps break things down.
It's like you're building a scaffold for their knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Providing the support so they can learn safely and effectively.
Exactly. And just like when we're actually building, safety comes first when it comes to training too. I always emphasize that it's okay to ask if something's not clear. I want people to speak up.
You want to create that culture of communication.
Totally. A team that's trained well is a team that works safe and gets things done right.
100%. Okay, this next question feels like we're shifting gears a little bit. It's all about, what is your experience in managing budgets for scaffolding construction projects? Why is being good with money so important for a supervisor?
Because at the end of the day, construction, it's a business.
That's a good point.
You can have the best safety record out there, the best crew, but if you keep going over budget, that's going to raise some eyebrows.
No one's going to be happy about that, that's for sure. So how do you show them you can handle the money part of the job during an interview?
Be ready to talk about how you estimate project costs, how you get the best deals from suppliers, negotiating prices, and then keeping track of all the expenses from start to finish.
Because it's one thing to say, oh yeah, I'm good with budgets. But can you give them an example, like a story, to back that up?
Definitely. Don't just throw numbers at them. Give them a real-life example of how you saved money without cutting corners on safety or quality.
Oh, that's good. Like what? Give me an example of what you'd say.
Okay, so let's say you were on a project where the budget was really tight, and you realized you could use less material if you changed the scaffold design just a bit. You could say something like, we were going to go with a continuous platform, but I realized a staggered platform would work just as well, and we could use about 15% less material. That saved a good chunk of change without making things any less safe.
So you're thinking creatively, finding those solutions, and then explaining it all clearly to the interviewer.
That's the key.
Okay, that makes sense. And while we're on the subject of, really showcasing your skills, I got to bring up RoleCatcher's AI again, because we talked about how it helps you like fine-tune your answers and all that. But what about those times when you're not even sure what skills to talk about in the first place?
Right, you don't even know where to start.
Exactly. Like, what if you don't even know what they're looking for?
That's when RoleCatcher's resume analysis can really save the day. You just upload your resume, and the AI, it compares your resume to like hundreds of similar jobs. It figures out what skills might be missing, things that could be holding you back from getting an interview.
Like having your own personal recruiter, but instead of charging you an arm and a leg, it's just part of the platform? That's incredible. What other like hidden gems are in RoleCatcher that people should know about? Give me the inside scoop.
Okay, don't underestimate the career guide. That thing's a gold mine of info.
Really? What kind of stuff?
It tells you about what you can expect to earn, how you can move up in your career. It even tells you about extra certifications that could give you an edge. It's like having a roadmap for your whole career,
Okay, so definitely check out that career guide, everybody listening. And speaking of career path, and I'm glad you brought that up, let's talk about what that actually looks like for a scaffolding supervisor. What kind of growth opportunities are out there?
So as you get more experience, you can go from running smaller jobs to supervising these big, complex projects.
That's cool.
You could even move into project management if you wanted, or even get into a leadership role within the scaffolding company itself.
So there's definitely room to climb that ladder.
Absolutely. And the need for good supervisors is only going up, 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 so it's a good field to be in if you're willing to put in the work and keep learning. And remember, construction is always changing, so you got to be ready to learn new things all the time.
It's like you never stop learning in this field.
Never.
Now, the career guide also talks about some of the not so glamorous parts of this job. Long hours, tough work conditions. It's not for everybody. What would you say to someone who's like, okay, this sounds kind of cool, but also kind of hard?
You got to be honest with yourself. It's not like a nice, cushy office job. It's demanding, physically and mentally.
Yeah, I bet.
But if you're someone who likes to be in the thick of it, likes working with their hands, and seeing something they build at the end of the day, it can be really rewarding.
And you're outside.
Sometimes.
Sometimes, right.
It's not just about putting up buildings. It's about building a team, making sure people are safe. You play a big part in these big construction projects, you know?
There's got to be a lot of pride in that, seeing a skyscraper you helped build, right?
Sure. Seeing some big, complicated scaffold come together the right way, knowing you led the team that built it, that's a great feeling. There's nothing else like it.
And let's not forget, those skyscrapers aren't building themselves.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, the career guide also mentions something about the earning potential in this field. It's not just about job satisfaction.
Oh, no, not at all.
Yeah.
The money you can make as a construction scaffolding supervisor, that's definitely a plus. It's a good living, often better than what you'd make in other industries.
I bet.
And the more experience you get, the more certifications you rack up. That salary keeps going up.
So there's a real incentive to keep learning, keep moving up in this field.
Absolutely.
That's good to know. So it's a career where you can make a good living, especially if you're willing to put in the time and maybe even move to where the construction jobs are.
You got it. In fact, the career guide, it actually breaks down how salaries can be different depending on where you live. Like big cities where there's a lot of construction, they often pay more to get the best people.
That makes sense. Supply and demand. That's good info for anyone thinking about relocating to boost their career. Now, before we wrap up today, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, this whole idea of never stop learning. Why is that so important in construction, especially if you want to be a supervisor?
Because construction, it's not a standstill industry, you know?
Mm-hmm.
There are always new tools, new materials, new safety rules coming out. You got to stay on top of that stuff if you want to be seen as a leader, someone who's moving up.
So it's not just what you know right now. It's about being willing to learn new things and adapt as the industry changes.
Exactly.
Okay, so for people listening who are already in construction or thinking about it, what are some ways to stay up to date on all those changes?
Oh, there's a ton of stuff out there. You can get those industry magazines, go to conferences and workshops, even just being part of online groups and forums. That's a great way to see what other people are talking about.
It's like networking, but online.
Exactly.
And it's like building a scaffold for your knowledge, right? You're always adding new levels, making sure the foundation's strong.
I like that. That's a great way to put it.
And don't forget about good old-fashioned networking, too.
Right. Talking to other people in the field, sharing what you know, what you've learned, that's huge. You can get so much out of that.
Okay, so to wrap this all up for our listeners who are getting ready for those construction scaffolding supervisor interviews, what are the big things you want them to walk away with?
First things first, know what you're talking about. Seriously, dig into those RoleCatcher guides, the interview guide, and the career guide. Use them to put together answers that really showcase your skills. And remember, it's not just about what you say, it's how you say it.
Like, don't be a robot.
Right. Share those details, specific examples, and let them see you're excited about this stuff. That passion will come through.
Don't be afraid to let your personality show either.
100%. Be yourself. Let them see you're not just qualified on paper, but that you'd be a good fit for their team too. That matters a lot.
That's such good advice. And listeners, remember, RoleCatcher's got your back. That AI can really help you fine-tune your resume and your answers so you're speaking their language right from the start.
It's a game changer.
It really is. And once you get that interview, just relax. Be yourself. Let that passion for construction shine through.
You got this.
Okay, awesome. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive into the world of construction scaffolding supervisors. But remember, this is just the beginning. Take what we talked about today, use those resources, and you'll be well on your way.
Good luck out there.
And remember, safety first.
Yes.
Yeah, there's definitely like a sense of accomplishment there, right? You can point to something and be like, I helped build that.
Totally. It's a cool feeling.
It really is. Okay, now we've talked about the job, the skills, but what about the money? The career guide mentions the earning potential in this field. That's got to be a big factor for people, right?
Oh, absolutely. The salary for construction scaffolding supervisors, it's definitely something to get excited about. It's a good living, often better than you'd make in other industries. And the more experience you get, the more you can earn. Those certifications we talked about, those help too.
It's a career where you can make a good living, support a family, especially if you're willing to put in the work.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to go to the work is. Some places pay more than others.
That's a good point. The career guide actually broke that down a bit, right? It talked about how salaries can be different in different regions.
Yeah, for sure. Like those big cities with tons of construction going on, they often have to pay a premium to attract the best people.
That makes sense. It's all about supply and demand, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good info for anyone listening who might be open to relocating. Now, before we wrap up today, one last thing I want to touch on, this idea of continuous learning, which you mentioned earlier. Why is that so crucial in a field like construction, especially for someone who wants to be a supervisor?
Well, think about it. Construction is always changing. New tools, new materials, new safety regulations are always coming out. If you want to stay ahead of the game, be the one people look up to, you got to keep learning throughout your whole career.
So it's not just about what you know right now. It's about being open to new information, new ways of doing things.
Exactly.
What are some ways people in this field can stay up to date on all those changes?
Oh, there's so much out there. You've got your industry magazines, conferences, workshops. Those are great for networking too. And then you've got online forums, groups. It's like a whole other world of information and connections.
That's a good point. Networking, it's not just about shaking hands and handing out business cards anymore. The internet's a powerful tool, so use it. All right, so to sum it all up for our listeners who are gearing up for those construction scaffolding supervisor interviews, what are the key takeaways you want them to remember?
Know your stuff. Seriously, dive into those RoleCatcher guides, the interview guide and the career guide. Use them to put together answers that really show off what you can do. And remember, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. Details, specifics, enthusiasm, those things matter.
Let them see that you're passionate about construction.
Exactly.
And don't be afraid to let your personality come through, too. Be yourself.
Absolutely. Be authentic, show them who you are, and let them see that you'd be a great fit for their team.
Awesome advice. And listeners, don't forget, RoleCatcher's got your back with that AI. It can help you fine-tune your resume, practice your answers. It's like having a secret weapon in your job search arsenal. So use it.
Seriously, it's a game changer.
All right, folks, that's a wrap on our deep dive into the world of construction scaffolding supervisors. We hope you learned a lot and feel ready to tackle those interviews.
Good luck out there.
And until next time, remember, safety first.